Hello, welcome to this Lit Happens Unpacking Senior English video. If you are tuning in, there is a very good chance that you probably listened to our first episode of the podcast where, as host Adrielle and myself, Belle, have introduced ourselves. We talked a little bit about what has inspired us to create this channel, and we've also given a bit of an overview of the fact that we are English teachers, that we want to help new teachers up and coming, and also experienced teachers that are just very strapped for time right now. And so if you listen to that first episode, you'll know that we also talked a bit about what the senior English course looks like in New South Wales. We did a bit of an overview of the prelim course and the HSC course. And if you looked at our show notes or you've looked at the notes in the channel, we also uploaded a free little resource just to help with that planning phase and have a nice little overview in a quick 6-document setup. Now, many of you are probably thinking, well, yes, but there's a new syllabus coming up and there'll be changes that need to be made. You're absolutely right. So this document and some of the tables that have been put in there help you do both. So if you are still trying to revamp your year 11 and 12 course, or you just want to double check and see how that's going, you can use the documents for that. If you are likely already starting to plan and think about what the new HSC syllabus looks like, with the prelim course being studied next year in 2026 and 2027 being the first HSC cohort, with the new prescriptions, then you can also use the documents for that. So what I will take you through in this document is a bit of a comparison, what the current prescriptions and assessment regulations are, and also what the new ones are looking likely to be. And that should hopefully give you a little bit of a sum up and a head start looking forward to planning, because as many of you established experienced teachers will know, all the modules are the same. It's actually just the text prescriptions that have changed. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue. If you're looking at this first page with me here, you can see that I have some notes, just a bit of an overview on what NSW, which is the New South Wales Education Standards Authority, and they determine not only do they help determine what the prescriptions are and what we're studying, but very, very key is the assessment. Not only the HSC assessment, but also the internal school assessment, because there are some rules and regulations around that. And so I thought we'd just start off unpacking that first, and then we'll move on and I can show you how exactly to use the tables and the files in this document for your advantage. So just for this video, we will focus on advanced and standard English as the most common courses that we're planning for. To begin with, when you're looking at the preliminary NSW requirements, that is your year 11 advanced English and year 11 standard English course. Basically, the very first main regulation is that the common module, which is the reading to write module, it must be the very first unit. So term 1 of every school year for a year 11 a cohort or class doing standard or advanced is beginning with reading to write. Now, the beauty of the prelim course is there is no prescribed set of texts, no core text that must be chosen from. Schools have a lot of freedom in this regard, and best practice really is to try and select some texts or text types that will be used as a model for what the students are going to do in year 12. So therefore, you can get that sense already that we've got backward mapping happening here. You know, most schools, most faculties might decide, well, what's our year 12 pattern of study? What courses are we choosing? What type of text have we selecting based on the regulations there? And then making sure that year 11, as best as we can, helps set those students up for those texts and the types of assessments that they're going to create. So we've got 3 assessment tasks as well. Maximum 1 task per term. You can have a task be weighing as less as 20%, and the maximum weighing 40%. Only one of those tasks can be a formal examination, so like an unseen exam. Generally, most schools will do a bit of a prelim exam or something similar. And also that one task should be multimodal, because and everyone who's teaching the current prescriptions knows that that is a prerequisite or requirement, I should say, for the HSC course. So moving into a reminder of the HSC English assessment. In school, you have 4 assessment tasks, 1 per term, remembering that term 4 of the year 11 year is when your students will officially become year 12 English HSC students, and therefore term 4 is the very first year 12 task. You'll find that the weighting has a bit of a difference here. The minimum task can weigh 10% with a maximum of 40. Only 1 task out of the 4 is meant to be considered a formal written examination unseen. Quite generally, this becomes the trial paper for most schools. Also, we've got the multimodal component, so 1 task has to be multimodal as well. Now, the formal written examination, I should say, also has a maximum weighting of 30%. Craft of writing has to be assessed somewhere with a total weighting of 25. And the common module, when that is assessed, also must require a related material on the student's part in their assessment. That is not then a requirement once the actual HSC exam comes along, but they do need to have that related text in their official common module assessment task. So usually what that might look like is that term 4 is some schools might go a multimodal component where they're covering their common, their related, and the multimodal tasks. Some schools do a little bit of a combination where they might be assessing their common, but could also possibly be incorporating some Module C elements. So there is some leeway there, absolutely, depending on your school and your cohort and your students, but just bearing in mind that these are the NESA kind of stipulations. This is what keeps it sort of fair and consistent for all students across all different systems of schooling in New South Wales. And if you're still bearing with me, that's excellent. Well done, and thank you. I'm going to take you through the next document. Should have clicked on there. I'm just going to start with Advanced English. So remember that in the preliminary course, there are no prescribed texts. As an advanced English teacher, you have the capacity to select what you think will not only work best for your cohort or your class, but also what is going to provide students with the skills that they will need when they do complete the texts of Year 12, which you have already chosen and are already prescribed. Also, a quick reminder that backward mapping from the Year 12 course into Year 11 will really give you that guidance for what particular texts you are choosing to use, what you're doing with them, and even as far as, planning the scaffolding and even the assessment task to, in some ways, mimic what the students are going to access in Year 12 and what they're going to be assessed on, so that we've sort of prepared them a little bit for those skills and students are really trying to hone them throughout the HSC year. Now, if I take you through that HSC NESA requirements checklist, in terms of prescribed texts, 4 are prescribed. You've got 1, you must do a Shakespearean drama with them. You must do a prose fiction. You must do either poetry or drama. There is also a 4th option text of non-fiction, film, or media, or any of the above categories. You've also, of course, got Module C, but remember that whatever 2 short texts you choose from Module C, they do not adhere to those top requirements. They are additionals because they are used to more so springboard students into learning and creative writing, as opposed to have to engage with them on a more sort of essay or analytical level in the exam. So there really, Module C, Craft of Writing, is a really nice complement to all your other modules. Definitely when I'm programming, I try and select at least two Craft of Writing texts that really either play up with language and connect to one of the other modules, or even in ideas wise, and just giving students a sense of how to transfer those ideas or those maybe skills or creative writing tools in a new format and in a new text. We've just created a little bit of a table for you in case you're trying to map out how that works. Now, with the current prescriptions, One way that I have taught it and one combination that I have used is my common module is my Shakespearean drama. So I have taught Merchant of Venice in there. When it comes to my module A, I have done poetry. And in that one, I do Plath and Hughes with textual conversations. So that has me covered. So my other remaining there also is the prose fiction. And in the prose fiction, I do Artist of the Floating World. So therefore, I have covered those 4 prescribed text prerequisites because I've got Merchant of Venice as my Shakespeare, Artist as my prose, Sylvia Plath in Module A as my poetry. And in that 4th category, I can double up again with another poetry or a drama and I do that with Hughes. So that has me covered. And then in terms of Module C texts that I have used that work well with that combination, stamp collecting works quite well, particularly has some nice connections to Artist of the Floating World. Eulogy for Gough Whitlam also works quite nicely when you're looking at ideas of justice and empathy and service. So that works really nicely with Merchant of Venice. And that crafty feeling is quite a nice one that looks at the craft and writing in itself, which is also a great text. And I've also done Gwen Harwood's Father and Child also seems to work well. And I like to relate that a little bit to Plath and some of her poetry that she writes, even with her child, or Nick and the Candlestick that she writes for him. So that's just one combination. What many schools will do is they will play around with those combinations. Another one, for example, might do something like 1984 in the common, and that covers you in prose fiction. So then what you might do as the Shakespearean drama could be Henry, and then what you would do in that poetry and or drama is you could do Donne and Wit with that combination as well. And then in terms of mod Cs, I might be doing something like Pearson's Eulogy, Harwood, even Numley's Love and Honour, lots of options. So just a couple of combinations, and you can have a look at where you fit. And if you're thinking about the new prescriptions, well, now is the time to look at those prescriptions and see what might fit where, because I'm sure that this year you and your faculty will get underway in planning for that transition as well. So that's what that table helps with. And now in the next document, really that's just there to help you sort of map and develop somewhat, your scope of sequence of once you've selected your text, where are you going to be teaching them, in what term, what specific text in that term, what might the assessment look like, and what might the weighting be. So just a couple of things to bear in mind is that year 11, term 1, they will start with reading to write. And then term 2 and 3, it's up to you where you place module A and B. That will depend on what your assessments look like or what your texts are. And then when it comes to term 4 of that year, which is, remember, the very first year of HSC English, in that particular term, you're actually making sure that you are starting with the common module, text and human experience. And that is the common module that both all advanced, standard, studies, EALD will be starting with as well. So everyone starts the HSC year on that level playing field. And then you have term 1 of the next year, which is your technical term 2 of year 12. You've got that term and the term after to play around with, where you would put mod A and mod B. Because bear in mind, it would also depend on what assessments you're doing there, where your trial is. If you're a school that does their trial in term 3, then perhaps you can just see what works and it doesn't really matter perhaps where you put A and B. If you are a school that does their trial at the end of term 2, then you may need to be a little bit more deliberate about which text gets studied when, so that there's ample time to go through the text, examine, analyze, prepare some material in time for the potential trial. So yeah, just being a little bit thoughtful about where does your textual conversations go, because remember that's a pairing of text. So depending on what pairing, you might be very much bogged down in reading, or it might be a collection of poetry. So being mindful that that's 2 texts in that space of time. And then also in your module B, if that's a prose fiction, if that's a big novel, or something also quite dense, you want to think about whether there's enough time for students to read, you to teach, analysis to occur, all of those things. And it will also depend on, your assessment schedule, your senior assessment schedule for the year two. Obviously, in a lot of schools, the executive team will ahead of time make a determination of where the assessment period lies, and that might also have further bearing on where you teach what, depending on how much time you have until the assessment comes up. And then the last category for that one, when you're looking at Module C works as a really nice unit because it does not have to be taught standalone. Some people like to teach a big chunk of it, maybe within their term 3, where they're doing their final revision after the trial or after the final assessment. But it is one that works really well concurrently. You can use it in term 4 when you're looking at text and human experiences to elicit the concept, to elicit that common rubric. It's also a really great way to get students looking at related texts. Obviously, they would have to choose their own, but another great opportunity to introduce unseen texts, which is something they're going to have to learn to do with the common module in the examination. So you can definitely introduce your Mod C text there. And then you might actually like to isolate a Mod C text that works really well with your Module A or your Module B, or even the common, and look at it side by side and make a connection to either the language features and the distinctive language features, or even looking at the distinctive ideas. So yeah, that's another way that you can do it. You can even isolate it, and then you could look at them again further down. And even if with your students, you actually map out and you look at, the connections of a Module C text with all their other texts and modules, because I think that really strengthens and gives them more room for ideas. Sometimes students will really engage and connect with their common module. Sometimes it's their Module B, sometimes it's their Module A. And if you're sort of supporting them to look at their text more holistically, then there'll be a lot more avenues for them to come in to then create and craft their own responses. Okay, if I move into the next document, very similar thing, but for standard English, with this one, it's 3 prescribed texts because they don't have a comparative. So they do not do a module where they compare 2 texts side by side. That doesn't, of course, necessarily mean that there aren't modules or text selections where it's a suite of text. Like in your Module A, when you're looking at language, identity, and culture, there's a suite of poetry in there. But basically, you're looking at 1 prose fiction, 1 poetry or drama, 1 nonfiction or film or media. Again, you can choose at least 2 Module C texts, and they are separate from the prescribed list. And standard students also have to ensure that they put a related text within their common module assessment. And again, like the advanced course, you have room in year 11 to place the text where you feel they best need to go as well. So you've got that option too. So as an example, one pattern of study that I see is you might do in your common module the novel Vertigo, so that covers your prose fiction. Then in Module A, Identity, Language and Culture, you might do the suite of Asian poetry. And then that leaves you with Module B in the category of nonfiction, film or media, and you could do Truman in there. Another combination might be that in the common module, you might do the film Billy Elliot, and then you might do your novel Curious Incident, which fits under your prose fiction. So then you know that your Module A will be the poetry or the drama. And then you have the options of Module C text, something like The Sporting Spirit. Luca Lessons Module C text is quite popular in this category, as is Nam Lee's text as well. So if I'm planning, you can see that in a standard course, you've got preliminary reading to write. You've got your Module A of contemporary possibility, you've got your close study as your Module B. Then you go into your common module, just like HSC, Advanced and Studies and EALD. And then there's your module A and your module B. And obviously, very similar to what I said in advanced, your module A and B, where you place them, whether they're in the second or the third term, will be dependent again on your assessment schedule, on your trial, on the types of texts you're trying to have the students produce in the ways that they are required to respond. So it takes a lot of backward mapping there as well to make sure all your ducks are in a row. Now, just for those teachers who are starting to think about the new prescriptions with the new syllabus, so your HSC cohort of 2027 will be the first lot with these prescriptions, which means your year 11s will be starting next year. If I'm just looking at some of the major changes, the major changes really are the fact that it doesn't appear that a multimodal presentation is a must. It also does not appear in the new documents and prescriptions that the assessment of the common module has to feature related material. And the biggest change is all the modules and rubrics virtually remain the same, except for studies, slight changes there. But with advanced and standard, they are the same. However, there are new prescribed text lists. There are some very big changes in that list that will likely require new text combinations, programming, and units of work. So have a look at all the information online from NESA, the New South Wales Education Standards Authority. They have the document HSC English Prescriptions 2027 to 2028, and also on the curriculum website, the New South Wales curriculum, you'll see that they have some additional supporting documents there, breaking down the curriculum into stage 6 advanced standard studies and so forth. So all information has come from the documents that have been available. As always, they might be subject to change, but for the moment, that's what we're working towards for a new year of senior programming. If you've remained in this video, thank you. I hope that's been helpful. This document is free to access, and the video is just a support to walk people through who may just be starting in their new programming and syllabus aspects of their careers. So hope that's been helpful. From the Lit Happens podcast from Adriel and myself, thank you for clicking on. Thank you for taking a look. As always, we are producing these as a way of supporting you all out there in the trenches doing God's work. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.